Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy 24/7 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy 24/7 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy 24/7 podcast.
Good morning, Commodore fans. I'm Billy Derrick. Welcome into another episode of the Vandy 24/7 live podcast on the 440 Sports Network. We are brought to you today by the Wash House because we're talking all things Vanderbilt basketball. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off your dirty laundry and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. Feel free to chime in with your comments and questions. Already got Sam Smith in the comments section, so love that. Fire away any more questions you got after Vanderbilt knocks off Tennessee on Saturday. The women turn around yesterday and knock off Tennessee as well. Great weekend, big time weekend for Vanderbilt basketball. The first time that both the men's and women's team have swept Tennessee at home. I don't know the last time it happened in back-to-back days. That they usually probably don't do that, but 2014 was the last time that happened at home, where the men's and women's team both beat Tennessee. And I don't think we need to just scoff over that. Like that's, I know there's probably some Tennessee people that are looking at it going, well, whatever it once every 14 years, if you think about 8 years or whatever it is, but that's big. I mean, I think you look at what both of these programs have had to endure the last, for Vanderbilt on the men's side, the last 5-6 years, for the women, maybe even longer. So I thought that was massive, them getting both of those wins. And then you roll into this week, at least for the men, travel to Tuscaloosa tomorrow. And obviously that's never easy. The last trip to Tuscaloosa was not a pleasant one. I think that was the beginning of, I say the end for Stackhouse, but that was the beginning of a lot of conversation. The last loss in Tuscaloosa, there's some drama there, but again, and then Saturday, if you find a way to somehow beat Alabama, I'm not predicting them to beat Alabama, but say Vanderbilt beats Alabama, that Kentucky game on Saturday, it's on ESPN at 1:30. That's going to be the most juiced up environment at Memorial Gym in a long, long time. I know we've said that before, and we said that about Saturday. Like Saturday, that was a great juiced up environment. I think it was close to 50-50. I think there was a lot of orange in there, but the black and gold in there was louder. I think the students really held their own, and that's what you get when you invest and you make changes to your athletic department. Sam says, Marky B, best coach in the state, people are saying. You could argue that right now. I mean, Rick Barnes is done. I wouldn't say that yet about Byington, but he's got a chance, down the road here eventually to say, hey, I'm the best coach in the state here, right? Especially, you don't know what Rick Barnes decides to do down the road after, if Zakiya Ziegler leaves after this year, does Barnes decide to hang it up? Something to think about. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's definitely something to think about. I'm going to get into a little bit more of this game. I mean, you go back, and obviously it was not the best start for Vanderbilt. They got down 19-11, and then they got down 26-21. And then Ziegler picked up his second foul, and that really turned the tide because Ziegler didn't play the last 7 minutes of the first half. And I was looking around at Joey and Chris. By the way, I think Chris might hop in here eventually when he's got a chance. So we're going to try to hear from Chris. We probably won't go too long today. I've tried to work on getting a guest. I think we're going to try to get Tim Thompson on at some point this week. Tomorrow, Will Purdue. So we're going to have Will Purdue on tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So you will not want to miss that. We'll get back to our normal round table on Wednesday. We'll probably get Joey on Thursday. He's actually headed to Tuscaloosa. So that's a little bit of a look ahead. But again, any comments and questions you got, feel free to fire away. We're going to try to get Chris Lee in here eventually. But Ziegler goes out, and I'm looking around at Joey and Chris going, why has he been out for so long? I mean, and I know he had 2 fouls, but I thought that was massive. Ziegler, Tennessee without Ziegler, Byington after the game said, "I'll take that every day. Give me that." And the other thing about this game, Tennessee, this was not a fluke. Tennessee shot the ball well. They did. They shot nearly 50% from the field and 50% from 3. And they hit 17 of 21 free throws. They scored 75 points. Typically, on the road in the SEC, you get 75 points, you got a good chance to win, especially against a Vanderbilt team that, again, they hadn't been shooting the ball great. Now, I kept telling people this is a better shooting team than what we've seen, and we ended up seeing that big time. Vanderbilt knocks down 8 threes, and it feels like every single one of those threes was huge. And we do have Chris Lee in here. There we go. Chris, what's going on?
Good morning. A big weekend for Vanderbilt basketball.
Huge weekend for Vandy. And I was just getting into the game a little bit. I talked about this with somebody over the weekend. This was not a fluke. Vanderbilt, they played great defense, but Tennessee was hitting shots, Chris. And I think we hit on that after the game and the post game. I think that's something we got to remember about this game. That Tennessee, they shot nearly 50% from the field, 50% from 3, and they scored 75 points in a tough place to play. I think if you're Rick Barnes, you'll take that. Now, there were some other things that happened with Tennessee, whether it was fouling 3-point shooters. It felt like Vanderbilt got Tennessee out of character, Chris. Yeah. And we hadn't seen that in a long time, and I think you hit on that in the booth with us. Like, I don't know when the last time is that Vanderbilt was the more physical team at a lot of points in that game than Tennessee was.
Now that I've had 2 days to sleep on it, some things are going front of mind. I think we'll start with the negative. I think the negative is they had trouble closing teams out on their home floor this week. If you want to find something, maybe it was just a fluke. I think that's something they'll get better at because of their experience, but it was what it was. And by the way, still won both the games. So if that's your biggest negative, then that's probably not a bad thing. 2 things that I thought were huge for them were, I think, the return of Edwards, because it's like, okay, you can sort of explain away a game or two with taking the knee to the thigh, but you still have the question unanswered. That's like, how does this look when they play good teams? Right. And he looked pretty good, had a big hand in them beating Tennessee. And I think the other thing is Jalen Carey. Because before the season, I circled him. I thought he was a kid that, to me, with more opportunity, could really step up his game. I didn't realize Mark Byington pointed this out in the post game, that he's only 18 years old. I didn't know that.
I think he said 19. Yeah.
19. Okay. Well, either way, maybe it was what we thought. But I mean, he's a kid that, his brother played at Duke. His dad was an NFL first rounder. He showed a lot of potential last year, James Madison, as a part-timer. And that's now 2 games. And I know there's some bad with it. There was the, kicking the ball off his knees or whatever there was in the first half. But, at LSU, when McLaughlin got in foul trouble, it was Jalen Carey who stepped up and gave them big minutes. Saturday, he was probably their most valuable player. Had a double-double in that game. And you look around now and you say they've got a lineup of they've got 9 or 10 guys that can do really good things. I know a lot of people were kind of questioning Chris Magnon. He has made some big defensive plays for them. He is what he is. He's not much of a shooter. He's going to get in foul trouble, but he's going to make some very aggressive hustle plays and make some huge defensive plays. Very athletic. They don't win without his defense in 13 minutes Saturday. Going a little further, I think MJ Collins has been a rock for them lately. Just been a really steady player. He was not a guy who coming into the season, you looked at him and said these are, you weren't really sure what his attributes were. I guess defense would be one of them, and maybe to be specific defense without fouling, which can come in handy. But I feel like now the parts are really starting to come together in a way that suggests that they could make the NCAA tournament. Now, look, the stretch of games in front of them, I was looking on ESPN's BPI this morning. They play the toughest schedule in the country from here on out. So buckle up.
Yeah.
It may, I mean, we may 6 weeks from now, we may be having a different conversation. The schedule might have crushed them. But for right now, you've got to like where they are.
Yeah. The other thing too is, this identity, the identity of this team, I think what we're learning is defensively, defense to offense. All right. The last 2 games, you could argue were won on blocked shots. I know McLaughlin had the layup on the other end, and then, you had the save from Edwards, but Magnon's block right there, that won the game for Vanderbilt, and McLaughlin's block against South Carolina won. So, this is not an offensive juggernaut of a team. I think we know that they've got guys that can score. They've got Jason Edwards and Hogarth. I thought he's been exactly what they've needed him to be. By the way, Chris. Now he's turned the ball over some, but you've got to. And Joey and I always talk about that. You've got to live with a lot of his turnovers. Like he's having to do a lot, and you need him to facilitate. You need him to be aggressive. Last thing you need him to do is to be passive. But defensively, I think this could be I think it's definitely a top half defensive team in the SEC. Now there's a lot of other good SEC defensive teams this year, but Chris, if they can get into you, if they can have success forcing turnovers like Kentucky, they've got a legit shot at beating Kentucky on Saturday, because Kentucky, if you get into their face and you bully them a little bit, force some turnovers, they're a different team. So whenever there's a team that Vanderbilt can out physical, which we thought was going to be rare. I didn't think it was possible, Chris, that Vandy could manhandle Tennessee. Now, I'm not saying that was throughout the entire game, but the middle part of that game, the last 10 minutes of the first half and the first 10 of the second, I think it was, I mean, Vanderbilt out-physicaled them. So the question is, and I know the landscape of the SEC, how many other teams can Vanderbilt do that to? Because I think this tells me there's a lot. I thought Tennessee was one of those teams that Vanderbilt couldn't do this to. This tells me there's some other SEC teams out there that could get bogged down by this Vanderbilt style of play.
Yeah, I have a good friend who's a big Tennessee basketball fan. He has been complaining for a while that they're not very tough inside Tennessee. So I've kind of questioned that, and I thought that was an overreaction. So I want to pump the brakes on that a little bit, because you got some teams with some dudes inside coming up on the schedule. They may or may not catch Auburn with Broome. They'll get Cardwell either way. Florida's got some bigs who can play. I want to suspend a little optimism on that for now, but it might be fair. I mean, they are making the most of what they've got.
Yeah.
I still think the height is going to hurt them against some teams, But here's something I don't know if this has ever happened. They are 50th in the country right now in block rate at Ken Palm and 7th in steal rate. Now I think the block rate is probably gonna fall.
Mm-hmm.
But the steal game is part of who they are. I don't know if they've ever been top 50 in both. And I think the block rate is probably propped up by playing some weak teams out of conference. But still, they are in defense this morning at Ken Palm, they're 69th, which is the best they've been in a few years. So slowly they've kind of become a decent defensive team. And here's another thing, and I'm rambling this morning, but I think these are things that are just kind of popping into my head as we go. Tyler Nickel was also really good on Saturday.
Yes.
And that's a dimension they need. I don't think they're a good enough three-point shooting team, but he has had nights where he's 4, 5, and 6.
I think they almost have to have that from him against teams like Tennessee.
Well, and how do you get Tyler Nickel open looks? You've got AJ Hogard driving to the bucket, doing stuff. You've got AJ Edwards. You've got Jason Edwards doing what he can do. And then you've got McLaughlin underneath has been a headache all year. When he gets the ball in the low block, he is difficult to stop from scoring. And now you got Carey popping in and giving them the best game he's had at Vanderbilt. So, again, how much does this all carry going forward? I don't know. And it's going to look different when you go to Alabama or play some of these teams ahead. There's going to be some nights that they're probably going to have a stinker of a game at some point. But you've now put enough of it out there in spots to be like, okay, if on the right night you catch this team or on the wrong night for another team, they're capable of doing some things. Because the parts they've got a little bit of everything. They don't have a lot of anything, but they've got a little bit of everything. I mean, the one thing they really need is a 6'10" guy that can send shots into the third row. And the one thing they really don't have is a consistent three-point shooter. But they've got guys that can do that in spots.
Yeah, and I also the thing that got me in this game too, outside of Ziegler, when Ziegler's off the floor, Tennessee is a completely different team, and they don't have really another go-to ball handler. I mean, you've got Jordan Gainey, but I thought with Vanderbilt having Hogard, Tanner, and Huffman as well that can handle the ball, that point guard thing, that everybody being point guards, I think we're starting to realize a lot of the methodology behind that, because you've got to have multiple guys that can handle the ball, especially in the SEC. And even Huffman, didn't play a ton, but didn't make any brutal mistakes. He had that travel violation, but he's taking care of the basketball for the most part. Tyler Tanner, if Hogard was in a similar situation as Ziegler, Chris, without another, he'd have to play more minutes. There'd be more pressure on him. Having Tanner and Huffman back there that handle the ball a lot, you also see Edwards bring up the ball occasionally. I mean, Collins, I think that helps this team to where you're not, if Hogard's not bringing it up, we're lost. Tanner, they're comfortable with a freshman also bringing it up as well. And Tanner, I think I told you this in the booth, he pickpocketed Zakai Ziegler at one point in this game and went down and dunked it on the other end. This team's makeup is, we're going to lock you up. We're going to get turnovers. We're going to score on the other end. And whatever happens on our offensive end happens. We know we've got some scores, but we're not great in the half court. I think a lot of them would probably tell you that. Now, that doesn't mean they can't get better. But when you've got Carey doing the things he's doing down low, Chris, and that's not going to be there against every SEC team. Milicic got stuck on Carey one too many times. And Carey and Lanier too, Hogard against Lanier, they were backing those guys down. And so I know I'm rambling here too, but we're all still trying to figure out this team right now. Record wise, this is a good team. This is is it a tournament team right now? Yes. If the tournament started today, they'd be in. But It's early. It's almost too early to really be seriously thinking about it. But they're up to 37 in the net, Chris. Andy Katz, his Power 36 rankings, he has them at number 32, I think it was. You've got the national attention, like you were talking about in the postgame, which hasn't been the case in forever. And you've got opportunity ahead of you. Now, this Alabama team, Chris, I know you watched that Kentucky game. I was watching that as well. They're really good. Now, I'm interested in the matchup because Nate Oates and Byington, I think, have similar styles. So I don't think Vanderbilt will be surprised by what they see from Alabama. But this is one of those games that can get ugly, especially in Coleman. If you get down big early, how do you respond? I'm looking at that, because margin of victory still matters, Chris. They still need to go into this saying, hey, we cannot lose by 30, right? We can lose and still be fine, but you cannot lose by 30 by a wide margin here. And Alabama can do that.
A couple of random thoughts here, and I probably got to be out of here in 7 or 8 minutes to take care of some other stuff, Billy. But Vanderbilt's on-ball defense, I'd have to watch it again, but I felt like it was better than Tennessee's. On Saturday, which I would not have expected. Ziegler's had a weird year. Gainey's turnover percentage is a lot lower than Ziegler's is, and I guess that's who's running the point now that I think about it when he was out, which I would have not have sat Ziegler with 2 fouls, by the way.
For 7 minutes.
That was a little bit of a gift. But that's old school basketball, and that's what Rick Barnes does. And I think as much as I like and respect him as a coach, I just have a disagreement with how he handled that. But and Gainey's also the guy that when Ziegler, I think, had fouled out against Illinois, took it coast to coast and laid it in against a really good team. So I don't think it was like – it's not like the options dropped to nothing when he was out. But, and the other thing is, those assists, how many of those assists were on lobs?
Lobs, yeah.
They need to figure that out because they're going to have to face that against Alabama. But, it was weird, 3-point shooting. I'm going to look at this. Tennessee outshot them 10 of 21 from 3 to 8 of 21 from 3. Tennessee outscored them from the foul line by 1 point. The difference was I just thought Vanderbilt was better on the boards and better on the ball defending, the pickpocket. It's weird. Who would have ever thought the game would have played out that way? But it did. Where were you going before I launched into that?
Well, I was just going to say second chance points too. Vanderbilt had 18. Tennessee had 9. Vanderbilt did the things Tennessee usually does to teams, to Tennessee. Yeah. Willie says, Chris, give your thoughts on the offense versus defense substitutions that brought our offense to a screeching halt. Thank you. I'll hang up and listen. They didn't score the last 3:48 of that game. And I made sure to point that out. That can't happen again against any SEC team. Now, I know they won, and so maybe it can against an Oklahoma or a Texas. But, Chris, I still can't believe that. They didn't score for almost 4 minutes. I know they got a free throw or two in there, and they were still playing pretty good defense, but we could be easily talking about a Vanderbilt loss today, and the last 4 minutes of that game would be why.
That last 4 minutes was a little bit of a blur. I did not realize they'd gone almost 4 minutes without scoring until somebody mentioned it that night or the next day or whenever it was. You got pickpocketed in the backcourt on one of those for an easy layup. I remember that. There was the Edwards shot that Byington said thought it was down.
Yep. Hogard missed a wide open.
Yeah, and look, if you're looking at another negative, I really like him as a player, but the moment might have been a little big for Tyler Tanner. And I get what they're trying to do. Grant Huffman is a really good all-ball defender. He's giving them some big stuff at times, but he's also not a big offensive player, so you can get caught in a spot. And I don't remember who was on the bench when they went to defense.
Edwards. Was it Edwards and Hogard? I don't think you can have
Edwards and Carey
at
the same time. I don't.
Yeah.
You've got to have at least one of those two in there.
Well, and it feels like anytime you do go defense with this team, you have that risk of just doing nothing on offense. Like they
Yeah.
and that has happened, and it's happened at times in these SEC games, and they'll have to, like, down the stretch here. I think if this team makes the tournament, Chris, I think we'll be talking about Tyler Tanner developing a jump shot and starting to hit shots, because with that defensive, and even maybe Huffman too, like, you're going to need a bucket or two or three from the combo of Tanner and Huffman. I don't think you can just get nothing from them. And Tanner has been so good defensively that it's hard to nitpick him and his game right now. But I think a huge key for them is getting a little bit more than you are from Tanner, because you're really not getting. And the kid's been great. You're not getting a ton offensively. I think if you do down the stretch here, that probably tells you this team is a potential tournament team, because he's been on the floor a good bit. But
offensive ratings from Saturday per KenPom, Huffman had a 0 and Tanner was a 57. 100 is about average. And by the way, Hogard had a 100 on Saturday.
Yeah. By the way, what was, you told me Mugnon's plus minus in the first half, I think. What was that? Was he plus 13? Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
but here's my point. You've got to have, I think you've got to have probably in that spot, because when you get a stop, all of a sudden you're on offense, unless you're going to call a timeout to let Tennessee set its defense. I don't know that you can have Tanner and Huffman on the floor.
Yeah.
Because, here's the thing. You're looking for defense to get stops. Well, guess what? You get a bucket on the other end, and you don't have to play quite as much defense. So I think you've got to have, maybe in that spot you have Tanner or Huffman in the game, and they're both pretty good on-ball defenders. Yeah. And you have Hogard or Edwards in the game.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly what the combos were, but I did notice that, like, every chance they had, they would. And Willie points out that Huffman did turn the ball over.
He did, yeah.
Okay, fine. But he's also a guy who's played point guard and logged 3,000 college minutes. So I'm not going to kill Grant Huffman for that.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the last 3:48 of that game. Tennessee was going to make a run. That they were not going to go down lightly there, and they certainly didn't. But it sure did feel like a little bit of magic in the air with that Lanier free throw just going in and out. I mean, and you feel for him. I mean, he came back home, but he'll. Tennessee's got a chance against Mississippi State to rebound. Vanderbilt goes to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. And Chris, I'll leave you with this as you get going here. They're not going to go 2-0 this week, I don't think. I could be proven wrong there. But what are the chances they go 1-1 here? Beat either Alabama or Kentucky. Obviously, Kentucky is the game. That's the big game you need to have. But again, like we said, you can't get blown out against Alabama.
Yeah, and let me look at the schedule. These are interesting because Alabama and Kentucky are two top 5 offensive teams in the country.
Yep.
I don't think they've played a team like either of them yet. Like, they play fast. They're good offensively. Yeah. They played some teams like Drake that'll slow you down, and South Carolina that can muck you up.
And Tennessee will slow, yeah.
And maybe Missouri's not a super fast tempo team, but these are going to be, and Florida's going to fit in that category later too. It'll be interesting to see how they match up. I mean, look, if you go 1-1 this week, I think you've got to be thrilled.
Yeah. And then at Oklahoma,
they're going to be underdogs in both games.
Yeah.
That
at
one
Oklahoma.
Feels, gosh.
I think you need to get that.
That one almost feels the most winnable of the three. If they go 2-2, I'll even go throw Texas in there. That's the 5th. I even say if they go 2-5, I think you feel okay, because I think 5 wins might get them in the tournament from here on out, and I think 6 will. So you start counting, and you go ahead.
I was just going to say, because they've already beaten Tennessee. That's what they need. They needed a big shocker. You know, you're going to need another big shocker or two. But the scenario of getting in with 7 wins, you needed this shocker first, and they already got it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the KenPom page. They are outright favorites in 3 of their remaining 13 games. That's Texas here on the 8th of February, Missouri here March 1st. That may flip by then because Missouri's playing awfully well. And then Arkansas here on March the 4th. Let's say they get those just for argument's sake. They've still got to pick 3 up. I would say Kentucky here, just Kentucky is really uneven in its performance. Like Kentucky could come in here and hit 17 threes and blow them out of the building. Kentucky is also the worst defensive team in the league in league play per KenPom. So that could go a lot of ways. That would be one. I think at Oklahoma would be one maybe. And maybe Ole Miss here, but Ole Miss just win and beat Alabama to Alabama. So I don't know.
It's hard to predict these.
See, Auburn at home. I mean, Auburn's tough anyway, but then Broom's probably back by that point. That becomes nearly impossible. I mean, it's if they get 6, they're in the tournament, and I think that's your number. If you can somehow get 2 of them in the next 4, then you've got to be feeling okay about it. I don't let you ever feel great because the schedule never gets easy.
No. And Byington talked about that. He said it can look daunting, and I do like how honest he is a lot of times. Like, he said, yeah, it can be daunting, but we got to take one game at a time. And right after the game, he went straight to the locker room, and I'm sure started on the Alabama tape because they got to get down to Tuscaloosa. Yeah. And I think it is good. You get some days between Alabama and Kentucky. Probably good. This is a Tuesday night game. But both these teams coming off big emotional wins. Alabama's on the road at Kentucky, Vanderbilt against Tennessee. Chris, appreciate you hopping in. We're going to get Will Purdue on here tomorrow. So
nice.
Yeah.
Today?
Should be. No, tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow. Good. Yeah. Well, tell Will I said I've not spoken to Will in a few weeks, so
I will.
Looking forward to seeing that. And thank you. Sorry, I had to jump, and I've got to jump back to my
no worries
16 stuff, but wanted to help you out in a bind here. So,
all right, appreciate it, Chris.
You bet.
That's Chris Lee, publisher of Vandy247.com. Does a great job. And obviously, Will Purdue does a really good job as well. He's does pre- and post-game stuff with the Chicago Bulls, former Vanderbilt Commodore, 4-time NBA world champion. We're going to get him on the show tomorrow, talk all things Vanderbilt basketball, talk about the build with Mark Byington and what they've done so far this season. So looking forward to having Will on tomorrow. This podcast has always been free. We plan for it to be free. Here's how you can help keep it that way. Give us a review and a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Subscribe to Vandy247.com. Please do. Special 50% off offer right now. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is free as well. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. It'd be great. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy 24/7 podcast.